Hey guys, Rob here and welcome back to the channel. Today you join me for episode 27 of How It Was Made, and this is the Liberty Walk Ferrari 458 Silhouette GT that I am going to replicate. So the model I'm going to start off with is a good old Hot Wheels Elite Ferrari 458 die-cast model. This is the China edition and they're pretty cheap on eBay, so I picked this one up reasonably cheap. I then stripped the model down and then removed all the paint, and I'm going to be using some styrene sheet and some Tamiya putty to form all the bodywork. Now I start with some illustrations pinned on the board behind me so I can start using a marker to work out where the body lines are going to be and what I have to cut, and then I get the Dremel out and cut away the metal body. I'm starting with the hood here. This is a vented hood, so I mark out the size of the cutouts and then I use the Dremel and cut those out. Now I just basically use as many pictures as I can find on the internet to scale off, and I work from there. So this basically gives me the opening size, the maximum opening size. I can then use some styrene sheet and work out the rest of the shape by adding layers on the side and angling the pieces. I just use super glue to hold all these pieces of styrene sheet together. Just another quick job. I added some decals to the rear window, and I also wanted to have a bit of fun with some carbon decals, so I did the engine surround also. Okay, back onto the bodywork. So again, using the marker and working out what I need to do. This is the hood after it's had a bit of a sand up. This basically forms the shape, and then I can finesse the shape with some Tamiya filler as well. So that's what I've done here, just applied some Tamiya putty. Now this is a new method I've started using. I find some pictures on the internet and I scale them down on the computer and then I print them out. This basically gives me the shape of the fenders and where the crease lines are, and then I can transfer those onto some flat styrene sheet. Being that this Silhouette GT has some slab sides, I thought I would build these out of 1mm styrene sheet, and then I can form the rest of the shape from that. This is the hood, and I always put a bit of grey primer on there after I've done some initial work to see where I'm going with the shape, and then if I'm not happy with it, I can add some more. Alright, starting the major work with the body. I'm starting with the side sills here, and this is some 3mm styrene sheet that is sanded down narrow one end towards the front. It has a taper to it. I then make some templates so that this sill piece will fit into the die cast body. I then transfer those templates onto the 3mm styrene sheet. Those are then cut out, as you can see here, and a little bit of sanding on the underside edge so that they meet into the die cast body. The closer the join is, the better the glue will bond it, and I've made some notches here in the side sill for the front and rear fenders. As you can see here, they're just sitting in there so that they will eventually end up flush. These are then glued into position as the sills were glued to the metal body as well. I wasn't happy with the first effort on the hood, so I went back and redid it. Some more work on the back. I have to cut out some of the metal here, and these are the lines I've marked out for the grills. Now, to make it easier after the model was built and painted, I used the Dremel and cut a little slot so that the mesh would fit into the slot. These are the side sills with a little bit more exterior shaping to match the real car, as they weren't straight. Going back to the front hood, as I said, I was redoing it. I wasn't happy with it. I wasn't happy with the back edges, so I just pulled all the plastic sheet out and redid it. Onto the back of the model here, I've drilled out the 3 exhaust outlets, and this is final gluing of the side sills. Now these are glued on with super glue, so they're nice and strong, you get a good bond. Second time around on the hood, more happy with that. I then sprayed it with some matte black paint. I then did a masking tape template for some carbon fibre decals. Stuck that onto some carbon fibre deckle from Deckle, and this was going to be a challenge to see how much of this I could do in one piece. So it worked out pretty good. I just had to add some little inlays into the centre, but pretty happy with how that went. Just used a lot of solver set decal setting solution, and I added the frequency intelligent exhaust deckle on there as well. Now onto the rear fenders. The method I'm using here to space the fender off the metal body is using some little blocks of styrene sheet, just some mirrors painted gloss black and clear coated, and this is my carbon engine cover clear coated as well. I clear coated the hood, and then I sprayed some Tamiya flat clear over the top of it and added some mesh. This gives a dry carbon look to the front hood, and this is how it sits into the body. Okay, back onto the bodywork. So I'm using these styrene blocks as spacers, and then I glue the 1mm sheet outer fender onto the body. Use some masking tape to hold that fender against the blocks, and I did the same on the front fender as well. Now I did it this way because the gap between the styrene sheet and the original fender is open on this new Liberty Walk car, so I didn't want to fill that with putty and have to sand it out, so that's why I use this block method, as I'll be filling the top with putty that you'll see soon. So once they're all nice and dry, I can keep working onto the body. So at the back, the side fenders have to come in slightly on an angle. I then added some more styrene sheet in the top and the bottom to form the opening. This will all be seen, so again I scale off drawings I have and just add some little styrene blocks in there where I have to form the tops of the openings. Now there's some louvers in these vent panels, and they're wider on the Liberty Walk version, so I just ground out with the Dremel as much die cast as I could, and this is, now that the glue has dried, it's time to start adding some putty. So as you'll see, the styrene sheet forms the basis of the fender, and then I fill in the top section of the fender with putty, as well as the whole front of the model will be shaped with putty as well. It's only the back section that has the open vent, which I did that in styrene. This of course I'll probably have to add some more putty, but I put as much on there as I dare at the start, and then I'll see if I have to apply more after I start shaping it. So I let this 2-part Tamiya putty dry for a couple of days before I start shaping it. But here's the step that's going to take a lot of sanding. So first I basically use a sanding block, and I flatten where the wheel arches are, flush that with the front fenders so that I get the actual width of the fender. That's my starting point. Second part, I use the Dremel with that drum sander, and I run that around the inside of the wheel arch, and the Dremel sanding wheel follows the metal body, so then that gives me my internal wheel arch opening. Then you can start to sand the actual top shape of the fender and get it a parallel fender lip once the inside edge is sanded. So you can see here that this is just really the rough part of the sanding. This is the rear fender. This is pretty close to the finished shape. I then put some primer on it to get a consistent finish, and then it's easier to see the actual shape of the lip. So where it's slightly wider in some parts, I can come back and I can re-sand that a little bit more to get a consistent fender lip shape. I transferred that to the other side to match those, and then I started to shape the front nose. Now there are some creases in the front bumper bar that line up with the bonnet, so I use some flexible tape to mark where those lines are. Always using center lines and drawing the crease lines just with a marker on the putty, and then I can keep working back to those lines. A lot of rough sanding done here, and I always keep checking how symmetrical it is as well. This is just some card template stuck in there. I added some carbon fibre to the airbox in the engine, and this is the rear wing blade that I found in the parts box. Back to more sanding. So as you can see, I'm really starting to get the shape close to the body lines that I use a marker with, and just constantly checking how symmetrical it is left to right. I had to extend the rear stock bumper bar, so I added some Tamiya putty, and I needed some more putty on the front bumper bar as well in a couple of spots, so I just added some more Tamiya 2-part putty and let that dry for a couple of days. Here you can see with the marker line where I need to sand it back to, and you can see here there's lots of texture marks drawn on the bodywork to get it nice and symmetrical. So I run center lines through the model, through the headlights, so that I can get those consistent shapes matched left to right. That's most of the shaping done on the front bumper bar, but I'm sure there's more to do, so a quick coat of Tamiya grey primer to see where I'm at. There's a lot of rough edges on the plastic sheet and the putty, but this is just a step that you just have to keep going backwards and redoing, moving forward, sanding. You can see there's some little chips here and there. You just have to keep repeating this step over and over again to get the shape. But I am getting there. It does take a lot of work, a lot of effort. Just wanted to have a look with the hood in there and some wheels sitting in there to see how it looks. Not much happening with the interior here, but I have to modify the floor, so I'm cutting the front lip off and the rear lip off the stock plastic chassis as I'm going to rebuild a new front and rear diffuser for the Liberty Walk car, but you can see how the floor fits up underneath the body. Now to construct the nose, I'm going to use styrene sheet, so I'm using a piece of 2mm styrene sheet for the lower lip. I'll basically join this into the position, and I use a piece of 4mm by 4mm styrene rod as the center leg, and I basically shape that with a roundish shape. Add some more little fins on the side, put a bit of a radius sanding on there, and then glue that into position with some super glue. Again, a lot of this is just trial and error to see how it'll work. Some steps I do repeat. I might throw a piece of styrene away and recut it just until I get it right. Bit of primer on the back of the model to see where I'm at there also, and a bit on the front too. Now you can see under the lip line on the sides of the bumper, it's actually scalloped in a little bit, so I sanded that out to try and keep that lip line. The body still has to be finessed at this stage, but again, just another coat of primer, chassis in there to see how it looks. Time for a little bit of fun stuff, a break from the sanding, so I spray painted the stock Hot Wheels Elite calipers yellow, glued on some Hobby Design metal face plates and added some Ferrari decals, and also time for a bit of finessing with some Tamiya putty to fill some of the smaller gaps on the bodywork. So again, it's tedious to just keep going backwards and forwards, but the end result will be worth it. So continuing onto the front bumper bar, adding more putty, sanding, scalloping out a little bit. I put this green tape on there to show the body line, so I know where that sharp body line edge is, and I can sand up to that point. Time to cut the joins in the bumper bar, so I just use a X-Acto fine saw blade and cut a couple of millimeters deep into the putty. This will be cut a little bit more before I paint the model, and then I want to grind out some of the fenders underneath, the metal fenders behind my Tamiya putty fenders, so that the wheels will sit in there. After all the finessing, the body was primed in white 2K primer. This is dried now, doors and that's sitting in there, and this is the first step. So I painted the whole body in Rosso Corsa red Ferrari paint, and then I added some clear coat over the top of that. Came out really well. I hardly got any bits of dust in this one, so that was a success in my book, and I've just let that dry for a day before the next step will be to tackle painting the roof black. All my custom decals arrived. These were made by www.tkdiecast.com, so I lay all my decals out, a little bit OCD there. And the interior, not much work there. I'm just going to do some repainting, painting the red carbon black, and a little bit of gloss black detail painting. The body's then masked up so I can paint the roof, A pillars and B pillars black. I spray those in black base coat. I can then add all the decals on top of the clear coated red bodywork, and I do this at this stage because I want to re-clear the roof so it's gloss black, and I want to cover all the decals as well, so the whole body is clear coated again, and now all the decals are locked in under the clear coat. This is how the high-end maker Davis and Giovanni do all their models, and I do my models the same way. Roof came out really well, a little bit of dust on the actual paint, but it's not in the paint, so just from my workbench. So really happy with how the paint came out. Time for reassembly. So the stock Hot Wheels Elite rear metal pieces were added. Headlights were added back into the front of the model, and just a little trick, I used a black marker to colour in the edge of the headlight lenses to make it look like they have a black rubber around them, and started adding some black paint outs underneath the model, engine bay there, inside of the interior. I just do that with Tamiya flat black paint and a brush. The hood just sitting in there test fitting, and I can start assembling the model. So the rear hatch was screwed back in, rear engine compartment or surround, carbon surround was fitted, rear window was glued back onto the rear hatch, and the side mesh pieces were also added. These are all the stock Hot Wheels Elite parts. Rear tail lights were then glued in, and the chassis was test fitted back in there to see the engine. So here you can see I actually used the Dremel and ground out a bit more metal so that the tyre would sit up lower than my new wide body flare, because I want the model to sit as low as possible. It's always hard when you add putty. Okay, windows. So these are the side windows. The Hot Wheels Elite only have half windows, so I wanted to make a full window. So I'm using a 2-litre Pepsi bottle. I make a template with masking tape on the standard rear window, and mark out where the window would meet the body. I then transfer that masking tape template onto the 2-litre Pepsi bottle, and then I cut that out. The Pepsi bottle already has a curvature in the plastic, so this actually works very well. It's just hard to find a piece of clear plastic out of the Pepsi bottle that doesn't have any little scratches on it. Dashboard is glued back in. Couple of screws also hold it in, and I just had to cut out some of the trunk area to make room for the hood to sit on now that it's a vented hood. So just lots of test fitting first. This was then glued back into place into the body. Front windscreen was glued back into the model as well. Windscreen wipers were glued back on. This is white crystal clear glue which dries clear, so I use that for all windows now. Added the windscreen deckle, and I then glued the front bumper, front bonnet I should say, or front hood back into the model. Doors were screwed back onto the model as well, and we're nearly getting there, chassis sitting back under the body. Time to finish up the aero part. So there's a lower black front splitter. I just make this all out of 1mm styrene sheet, and just do the cutouts for the vertical pieces on the side, glue those in there, and then once they're dried, I will use some Tamiya putty just to smooth the edges. Now I have to make the inlet piece in behind the front bumper bar, so I just make a vertical piece screwed onto a base. This is all out of 1mm styrene sheet. Trace the opening with a black marker which fits on the inside, as you can see there, and then I will continue to cut that to shape. Same with the rear wing side blades were just cut out of the templates off the drawing I scaled off the internet, and the wing legs were basically done by eye and also made out of 1mm styrene sheet, shaped with a Dremel and then glued onto the rear wing blade. So this will form the GT rear wing. I then sprayed it in some grey primer just with a Tamiya spray can, and this is the front assembly for the intakes. It needed some curved blades, so I just used some 1mm styrene sheet heated up with a gas lighter, and then I glued those in place left and right. I just make these intricate pieces out of many pieces of styrene. It's a lot easier to do it that way. As you can see, lots of super glue to hold it all together, and that forms the basic shape that I'm trying to achieve. I can then use putty on all the edges, and then I can sand that all to the more rounded curvature shape that I require. So here I've added all the Tamiya putty. I let this dry for a couple of days and then sand it. Now the rear diffuser, again I'm going to construct this out of putty, so I start with the side plates and just a support strip at the back. I'll then start with the middle and chamfer some pieces, and then just keep adding pieces of styrene to form the shape, as you can see here. So I tried methods with bending styrene with heat, but it just didn't work too well. So I do it this way out of many pieces. Then I can sand it, add some putty, and actually get the radius edges onto it to form the shape that I want. Tedious work, but it is a method that does work in the end. So time to round out all the edges, so I just use Tamiya putty. I let that dry for a couple of days because it does shrink a little bit, and then I just sand it so that I have more of an organic shape, more of curved edges. Same with the front bumper insert here, and you can see here fins are glued onto the rear diffuser, and I've pretty much got the shape that I require. So this is how it will sit under the rear bumper bar of the model, and this is how the front section, the air intake, will fit as well. Again, I just keep going backwards and forwards, sanding and adding some putty until I'm satisfied with the result. I then will spray these in some flat black paint. I then add the decals if required onto it, and then these will be either covered in carbon fibre deckle, like this front air duct assembly behind the front bumper bar. This is done in quite a few pieces, ready to clear coat. I then make some templates for the side intakes with mesh. That's why I mentioned earlier that I did a cut with the Dremel in the body so that the actual mesh will glue into a slot, and same with the front bumper bar. So that was clear coated in matte clear from Tamiya, and added some mesh in behind as well. Rear wing was painted in red first, then the end plates were masked, and then it was painted in black so that I could then apply some carbon fibre deckle onto the wing. That was applied in one piece, just with a slot to go around the wing legs, and then I did the same with the rear, although that was just one piece of carbon, and that was applied on there as well. And now that whole assembly, after the Liberty Walk decals were added under the rear, I could then clear coat it. LBWK decals added to the side. Now the exhaust outlets, because this has an FI intelligent exhaust on it, I just used some brass 5mm tubing, cut that to length, gave it a little bit of polish up with a super fine sandpaper, glued those into place, and yeah, just having a look with the front splitter in place. Looks about right. I just continually check everything before I go any further with the steps. It's just the rear diffuser and rear wing sitting on in place. Happy with how they look, so I can move forward and finish those parts. Rear brake calipers were glued onto the disc brakes, as the wheels don't rotate on this model because they're so low. Front louvers were made out of some 0.5mm styrene sheet. And these are my custom 3D printed wheels that I had made by MIY Mini Models. Links in the description to his website. And then I did a final clear coat on the rear wing, rear diffuser and front splitter. New 3D printed rims were painted black and then clear coated. 4 Giardo decals were added. Tyres were added. Advan decals were added to the tyres, and the brakes and calipers were glued in behind the wheels. Floor was screwed into the model for the last time, and the front splitter, now that the clear coat had cured, was glued on. and also the rear diffuser was glued in place as well. So I taped these up with some masking tape to hold them in place. Wheels were glued on. Front was a little bit difficult, so I used these black discs glued on, and then glued the wheels to the black discs just to make it easier. No steering or rotating wheels on this model. Rear diffuser were held in place, and rear wheels were glued in place as well. I put about 2 degrees negative camber on the front and rear wheels to have those sitting in there nice, and reasonably happy with how low the model sits. I did go back and actually reset the height a little bit of the wheels and tyres just to get the model sitting a little bit lower, and the model now does sit onto the ground at the front of the model. Side windows were just a couple of drops of glue on the inside of the door trim just to hold those in place. Side mirrors were glued onto the doors with a little bit of crystal clear glue from micro scale, and then I screwed the model to a white leather base and made a custom nameplate for the front. So as you can see, a lot of work there, but I'm really happy with the end result. The model does sit on the floor. The front splitter is on the floor, and it's pretty low all the way around. Now I do have a fully or nearly fully opening model here. The doors do open, the rear engine lid does open, and I'm really happy to have a die-cast opening version of this car, the only one in the world at this stage. But yeah, overall really happy with the result. A lot of work, many months in this. I'd say I'm close to 200 hours into this custom model, but it is a one of a kind, and it is also my entry in the die-cast exchange 2019 tuner contest model build. So that is the 458 Silhouette GT model that I custom built. I hope you enjoyed this video. Stay tuned, I've actually got another model reveal to do before the end of the year, and it was just fun to compete with the other guys building models. So yeah, if you haven't subscribed to the channel already, please do. Don't forget to smash that like button if you like the video, and don't forget to check out my merch as well. But plenty more videos on the channel for you guys to enjoy, and quite a few more model reviews to come before Christmas as well. So I hope you enjoyed it, and as I say, make sure you subscribe, and thanks for watching Rob's Model Cars.